are talking about all different topics around transgender people, identities and communities for Trans Awareness Week, running from the 13th to the 20th of November. And previously we've had a chat about myths and attitudes. We've given you a rundown of transgender, what it actually means to be transgender. And today we're going to be talking about non-binary people, pronouns and language use. We're going to really focus in on it and give you lots of practical hints and tips on how to get it right. So, firstly, why is it important that we have a conversation about non-binary people, language and pronouns?
We need to talk about it because people still, unfortunately, don't know what it is. They don't know what it means. And it's important that they do know because, you're everywhere.
Yeah.
That they're here, they're everywhere, and it's respectful to know these things.
100%.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that.
Totally. And unfortunately, non-binary people do face disproportionate amounts of violence. They're part of the trans community, and the trans community in general faces disproportionate amounts of violence, aggression, assault, harassment, job loss, discrimination, health problems. The list goes on. We've come a long way, but we've still got a long way to go. So it's really important to have these conversations. The easiest thing that any person can do to help the community is to wear the rainbow, whether it's a lanyard, whether it's a badge, a brooch, or anything else, even some themed socks. It's a really quick and simple and easy way that you can show people that they are supported, that they are loved, and that they have allies in the community and the spaces that they occupy. So first of all, let's kick off with an intro round and pronouns.
So my name's Danica and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Taylor and I use she, her pronouns.
I'm Catherine, I'm non-binary and I use they, them pronouns.
I'm Lunch Lady Doris. Today on the menu we have hamburgers and fries. No, I'm Danny. I'm Danny France, he, him. I'm a bit of a humour person.
And we love it.
Love it. Alrighty, so firstly, let's kick off talking about non-binary identities. So for anyone who doesn't know, the non-binary flag is black, yellow, purple and white. So if you see those four colours striped on a flag, that's probably going to be the non-binary flag. I wish I had one here today, but I do not. I'm a bad non-binary person.
There is one on the window where we are currently located, so...
That is true.
The magic of editing.
Just like, oh my god, I forgot. Okay, so firstly, non-binary. What is it?
I think you're the best person.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, so non-binary is when you don't identify as either a man or a woman. Either you don't identify or you don't identify completely with those things. Or potentially even it could be when you identify with like more than one of those things, so multiple of those things. Or when you move around between those things. So it's not, you don't actually have like a fixed I am a woman or I am a man identity. It either moves around, it changes, or you feel completely outside of those identities. If anyone is wondering what, gender identity and what the differences are between those things, make sure you go back and watch our 101 episode. Because today we're sort of going more into detail on the non-binary spectrum. We've got a number of different sub-identities that fit under non-binary, because non-binary is basically anything that is not trans-binary. So you don't have to identify completely as a man or a woman. So there's a lot that falls under that umbrella. The first I'll go into is my own one, which is static. I believe I don't know whether that's the actual name for it, but I call it static non-binary. I feel pretty much in the same spot every day. I move around a little bit, but I feel pretty fixed, just slightly feminine of the center. If we're talking about like a scale of being totally feminine to totally masculine, I'm probably like just over on the feminine side of that spectrum, but closer somewhere in the middle. And it moves a little bit, but not that much. The second we'll go into is gender fluid. Does anyone want to chat about this one?
Gender fluid's where you're kind of a mix. You're kind of just all,
You go across the line from being extremely feminine some days to extremely masculine to in the middle. It's very much go with the flow day to day.
Yeah.
Totally. The next one we've got is agender. So agender is where you don't identify with gender at all, but you might just feel like you don't even really fit into the gender spectrum at all. Then we've got demi-girls and demi-boys. So demi-girl is where you feel partially a girl. So usually not always, some non-binary people do, you can identify as non-binary and as a demi-girl. You can also identify as a man generally, but also feel like a demi-girl. So you're partially a girl. Usually it sits under the non-binary umbrella because most people who identify as more than one gender will probably not consider themselves sitting on a binary. So it's where you sort of simultaneously feel like a woman as well as your own gender at the same time. And same as demi-boy or demi-man. You might feel like you sort of generally are a woman or generally are a non-binary, androgynous, but you swing over to feeling like a man from time to time. Or that you might feel that you are both at the same time as well. Like that's bi-gender. So bi meaning two. Bi-gender people feel like they are two genders at the same time. So they might feel like a woman but simultaneously like a non-binary person, or simultaneously a woman and a man as well. And then you've got the nice sort of inclusive one of genderqueer, which I love that term, just genderqueer, because you don't have to explain yourself. What do you reckon?
I like the idea of not explaining yourself.
Yeah, because as someone who also uses queer as an identifier, it's like I'm somewhere in there, but some days might not know, or it might change. It's just basically it's not straight, and I know that. I know that much.
Yeah,
it's how I look at it and interpret it for myself. So
totally.
Yeah,
and it puts the pressure off of feeling like you have to know what you're going to be in the future as well.
Yeah,
I feel. All right, so something that gets sort of tossed around in the community a little bit is this idea of like, are non-binary people part of the trans community? Like, as you already know, spoilers, they are. Yeah. However, sometimes people who are non-binary feel like they're stepping on toes when they identify as trans if they don't have body issues and they're not changing their sex. Like they're not going under HRT, hormone replacement therapy, or if they're not getting any corrective surgeries like breast augmentation or bottom surgeries. Sometimes they feel like they are stepping on the toes of those people with those unique experiences, because sometimes in the community, trans is just used to describe people who go through those changes. But do we want to discuss this? Because it's an interesting one, because even within the LGBT spaces, you can get people who sort of start to gatekeep, I suppose, different parts of the community.
Here's the thing. Trans isn't the title. Trans is the journey, as you have said previously. You're transitioning into something else. You know, you're transitioning into your next stage of life.
Yeah.
So identifying, as trans is just saying, I'm this now, but I'm in the middle of a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing. It's just...
Yeah, and that journey doesn't have to be surgery.
It's whatever it looks like and feels like for you.
Yeah.
Totally.
So I do believe, it is under the umbrella of trans, because you're transitioning your look, you're transitioning your pronouns.
Yeah.
So what if you're not having top surgery? You're still going through other changes.
Yeah. And while if you aren't undergoing those changes, you might find yourself not having the same sort of discrimination or harassment of the level that people that are more confusing, I suppose, to cisgender people that they experience. It doesn't mean that your experiences aren't valid, because even being erased, like not being seen, can be really damaging and can be really hard. It's obviously doesn't have the same level of risk as being known as a trans person, more obviously, but it still can be very psychologically damaging as well. So you might feel, as somebody who isn't physically transitioning your body, that you don't fit as part of the trans community. You don't want to step on toes, but just make sure that you still understand that what you're going through is valid and that you still do fit into that transitioning umbrella. As Danni said, it's the journey. It's not the destination. Yeah, cool. And the next one, non-binary language. So generally speaking, you might or might not have heard of this, but non-binary people tend to use some terms to describe themselves. We don't even realize how many gendered terms we have until we sort of start thinking through it. Things like even aunt, uncle, mum, dad, brother, sister, she, obviously she, her, he, him, they, them, and so on. So a lot of non-binary people, but again, not all non-binary people, will identify with different pronouns, usually to what you expect. It might be that they identify with multiple, so they might be okay with she, her, as well as he, him, or he, him, as well as they, them. Many non-binary people will use they, them if they do feel really outside of those binaries, but some people also might change them. With gender fluid people, for example, they might feel more she, her one day, more he, him the next. And there's also other language, like with trying to be described as like a daughter or a son and that sort of thing. What are some of the ones that you've heard people use, like instead of those terms, like sibling as opposed to sister or brother or other ones? We had some of our young people talk about that, I think, at one of our sessions.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what they
Yeah.
Well, like instead of like this is my son or daughter, it's like this is my child.
Yeah.
Like it's a very basic one.
Perfect
This is my
example.
girlfriend, this is my boyfriend, this is my partner.
Yeah.
Or my
Or
spouse.
significant other.
But yeah, there's quite a few alternatives. I
Even
think.
auntie and uncle.
Yeah.
Like, just first name basis. Do you really need a title?
Totally.
You didn't raise the kid.
But even if you do want that title, there's a few other things that I've heard of. I've heard of uncle, like AUNCLE, like aunt and uncle mixed, uncle. I've also heard of Arnie, ARNIE instead of auntie.
Okay.
There's also
Or even just,
yeah.
whatchamacallit, like D.C. Initials.
Initials.
Even initials, like,
Yeah.
what's that show? There's a show. Instead of saying Aunt Jackie, they just go AJ.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even initials.
See, that's lovely.
I know for a fact in some families like auntie and uncle are respecting as well.
Yep.
Just because, respect elders, but in some terms it might be like use uncle, what did you say?
Uncle.
Uncle and like
Uncle.
auntie or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for others, I know that this was raised by one of our trans young people, talked about using Ren, because that is a nice and neutral term that has really taken off in the non-binary community. So Ren, and it's very versatile. It can be used as, auntie, uncle. It could be talking about extended family members, and it's a nice versatile term. It could be even your parents, and if you become a parent as a non-binary person, you've also got to think about that too. Like, you might be Ren to them, you might be something, something personal that your kid ends up calling you might just stick. But there's a few other ones even in there as well. I'm trying to remember what they were. I think one of them that I saw online, but it's a bit clunky, was Maddie. But I'm like, I don't know, that feels a little bit, it's a name.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a few others as well. I know that non-binary singer Sam Smith wants to be, like, they came out and they were like, I am hoping to have a kid with my partner. I'm excited to be a mummy. Because for them, it just makes more sense. They just resonate with that term. And in the comment thread of this post, so many non-binary people were just like completely different in what they actually felt comfortable with. Like, I'm comfortable with auntie, but I wouldn't be comfortable with mum. And I'm not comfortable with sister, and I'm not comfortable with daughter. But for other people, they might be comfortable with like being a wife and a mother, but not with being an auntie or a sister. So it's very much up to the individual, I think, on what actually makes sense for them.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Now we're going to talk about gendering and misgendering. So broadly, what is misgendering?
When you basically stuff up someone's either pronouns, the way they look, anything. Like, I know I get misgendered a lot. I don't know about everyone else.
Oh yeah, all the time, she, her. Oh, help this lady, help this woman. Like, I'm neither of those things. Who are you referring to? What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get like young fella.
Oh gosh.
Even a police officer said young fella.
Wow.
Yeah.
Or it's like, good buddy.
Yeah, like
Champ.
young man. Yeah.
Yep.
This fella.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get everything.
Young lad.
Yeah, I get like anything you can name a male. I think I've got.
Yeah. And
I just look at him.
yeah.
And because I get really awkward, I'm just like,
You want to maybe rethink that statement?
Yeah.
and just walk away.
Literally. And then people, like, because you don't want to, I just burped. Because you don't want to, like, bring it up or cause or draw attention to yourself, you often let it pass. But of course, whenever you do get misgendered, it's like your brain's going a million miles an hour. And I do the same thing as Tay. I tend to get quite annoyed, and I'll just sort of like stare at the person, and they must be thinking like, what have I done wrong? They don't even necessarily know that they've done something wrong, but it's so hard to correct them because it's like you're worried about a negative reaction a lot of the time as well.
You don't want to instigate the situation more than what it is.
Exactly. And you don't want to be name called. Believe it or not, do not want to be name called. So yeah, misgendering can be a lot of different things. It can even be, for example, calling somebody handsome instead of pretty. Like, there's lots of gendered language that we use every day. What are some other examples that we can think of? Like guys, gals, chick, babe,
Bro. I use that a lot.
bro,
Bruh.
brah,
Bruh.
brah, dude.
But also, I love using pretty to describe a dude.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
I love doing that.
totally. And
Because some guys do, it's like, yeah, they're handsome, but like pretty just works.
It does. Yeah.
But I've actually been, someone's like tried to correct me
Yeah.
once when I've said that. I'm like, why
Yeah.
can't they be pretty?
Yeah.
I'm on that end of the level as well. I'm just like, once you take out the labels and the masculine and feminine, just be.
Yeah.
It's like some girls,
Yeah.
they're like damn handsome.
Yeah, 100%. Damn handsome.
Yeah, you know?
And so yeah, as you can see, like, there's a lot of gendered language that we might not even realize. But for a trans person, this
gotta be,
gendered
yeah.
language can have a really big impact. Like, if you're a trans woman and you're being referred to as handsome, maybe some trans women might like that, but the majority that I know would definitely probably feel quite upset about that.
I think you've got to have a specific relationship with the person to use. So, you know,
Yeah.
if I have a mate who I go like, I sometimes go, hey dude, or hey man, like, you know, just, yeah, but I say that with all my friends. And when I say to them, I actually full on said, are you comfortable if I still say this, or would you prefer me to stop? But they said, no, it's fine. But I think actually stepping up and asking them for the permission to use it showed that I do know the effects it can have on a person.
Yeah. Another big one, us being Aussies, my mate did this, or my mate did that, like
Mate.
using the word mate.
I use mate a lot.
Yeah.
But mate,
Which, you know, as Australians, you know, we use it a lot, but some people that might be one of those words.
Definitely. Yeah.
so I think you've got to ask, you've got to have that type of relationship with the person.
Definitely.
Yeah. But again, that's like, this is for like those people who are very much into using labels and things like that, because like you don't have to label yourself at all.
No,
you can
not
simply
at all.
just be.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. So I just,
I don't like labels.
No, I just wanted to like
100%.
highlight that for a second.
Yeah.
Just be like, yeah, you do not have to label yourself which way or another, but this is just, if you do label yourself a particular way, these are words to be conscious of.
Definitely. And that's why, at the end of the day, as Danni really mentioned, it's about asking and not assuming. And an easy way to just be sure that you're not going to actually hurt somebody intentionally or unintentionally is just to use gender neutral language wherever possible, until you know that person and you know their preferences and you understand what they value and what they actually feel like inside. is probably the best way to go. Actually, before we go into gender neutral language, we'll talk a little bit about names and dead naming, as well as the broader categories of pronouns that we've got as well. So, kicking off, a lot of people who transition will often choose a new name for themselves that better matches their identity that they actually feel like, particularly if their name is already gendered or they just don't like it. So you might find that a trans friend might adopt a new name, or that somebody might have a name that doesn't sort of match up with your expectations of them based on how they look or how you perceive them. For example, I've got some non-binary friends with some really interesting names. So like I've got a non-binary friend who's named after like a day of the week. I had a non-binary friend that was called Noodle. Like really like odd names for sure, but definitely can be a bit different to what you expected. When you use somebody's old name instead of the name that they chose now, it's called dead naming, which I love. It's so dramatic. It's like, that name is dead to me. So something to keep in mind, it's important to try your best to learn and use somebody's name that they actually choose for themselves right now. Yeah. And pronouns, you've got loosely she, her, he, him, and they, them. It's important to try to use the pronouns that make sense to people. I think it's a lot over exaggerated because a lot of people go, oh, it's so awkward asking pronouns. It's actually quite simple.
Yeah, it's not hard.
Introduce your own pronouns when you meet new people. Say, I'm Catherine, I use they, them. And what that does, people might look at you sideways. It does happen from time to time. But it just invites those that actually might be trans or non-binary. Sorry, trans or, like they're different. It invites those who might be trans just to feel more welcome and to feel more accepted immediately. And they might then say to you, oh yeah, I'm so-and-so, I use they, them, or I use she, her. And then, immediately you've established a connection of safety with that person.
What I've seen people do is simply putting their pronouns in their online bios, whether that be Instagram, TikTok.
Email.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Yep. Definitely helpful. And again, some people might actually use multiple pronouns. Like they might identify with two rather than just the one. And some people, particularly people who are gender fluid, and this is where, it can get a little bit more complicated, might feel different pronouns on different days. For people who are gender fluid, I usually just have that conversation. Just ask them. I just go, do you have a preference, or can I use they, them to sort of cover more broadly? And then ask you, when I remember, how you're feeling on the day, because you might not remember every time. It might not come up. So is there a pronoun that I can sort of use for you that's going to be comfortable no matter if you're feeling masculine or feminine? But if they say no, that's valid. Then you know what, in order to respect them, you need to respect that and ask them each time you see them. Sometimes it might be obvious, like they might be wearing a dress and that indicates that they're feeling more feminine that day, or might be dressed up quite masculine, but sometimes it won't be as well. Important to ask. Some people might even have two names. That's something we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
If they are gender fluid, they might have names that work different on different days. Like when they're more feminine, they might go by a feminine version of that name, or when they're more masculine, they might go by a more masculine version of that name. For example, like Jessica versus Jessie, and so on. And let's have a little look at gender neutral language. This one is the big one. It's big ticket. So, gender neutral language. What is it? How can we use it? Let's give some examples.
Gender neutral language is just, for example, referring to someone without putting a gender in it. Oh, where's Catherine? They just went over there. They're in the back working.
Yeah.
Just taking gender out of the equation.
Yeah, totally.
Z and Z is another one I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So there's a few different alternatives for they, them. There's Z and Zia, there's Zay and Zem, and there's a few other ones. So I know that people struggle to get their head around sometimes the idea of they as a plural being used as a singular for one person. It can be tricky to get your head around at first. But an interesting fact is that they, them was used quite regularly and everyday as a singular pronoun up until I think only 60 years ago.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually that long ago that it sort of changed and shifted to being more of a plural form. And it's still in the dictionary, it's still got a singular definition as well. So if you've got some grammar, real grammar stigglers in the family that are like, it's a plural, it's like, here's some history. Here's a dictionary.
Yeah.
But yeah, even so, it can be hard to change your grammar usage. Like I mentioned earlier in an earlier video, my mum, she's 52 years old. She's dyslexic and she finds grammar and she finds words and language quite difficult. So it did take her a little bit longer to get her head around the they, them being a singular as opposed to a plural. But she really tried and she really practiced and she got her head around it. I think the easiest thing you can do to practice is just start using it for everybody. So rather than assuming anybody in the community, whether it's the person who serves you at the counter, whether it's somebody you're telling a story about, a neighbour that you don't know very well, an acquaintance, a work colleague, just starting to practice using they, them when you're talking about them to others. Like for example, like Tay, like if I didn't know Tay, I would probably be like, hey, Tay, I met this person called Tay today. They seemed really cool. They, went and got a pie. We hung out. It was really nice. So it's just like keeping it neutral and trying your best to like respect that you might not actually know who they are as well. What are some other gender neutral like language terms that we can use?
Even just referring to them by their first name.
Yeah, that's
like
a good one.
Catherine's doing this, Catherine's doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Catherine doesn't like this. Catherine loves that.
Yeah.
Just his first name.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. That's a great one. Particularly, if you do really struggle with the they, them, it might, if you're talking about them a lot, it might get a little clunky, but it's better than the alternative, which is to disrespect them and to make them feel invalidated and to misgender them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about how misgendering over time can affect people. What has your experience of it been over time? Because the first couple of times, or let's even just say the first year, you're sort of like, oh, okay, maybe this will change. But over time, it can get a bit grim.
I just get really annoyed.
Yeah.
Like every time, even though you've told them and they still do it, it just makes your blood boil, and you're just like, obviously it's not sinking in to them.
Yeah.
And if they can't do it, I mean, it's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
It's worse when...
Yeah.
it's worse when it's a situation where you've actually spoken to them and they're choosing to ignore it.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, like y'all just mentioned, they're either choosing not to do it or they're still doing it. You feel unheard. You feel, it doesn't matter, which can lead to, unfortunately, darker thoughts.
Yeah.
Kind of snowballs into serious problems.
Totally. Like being misgendered constantly can, at first, it's those little negative feelings like Tay was saying, like that anger, that frustration, that confusion, just feeling a bit down. And also if you don't feel comfortable in correcting that, or if you're worried about the reaction, you start to feel a little bit hopeless because you think, well, I don't feel safe. I don't even feel safe correcting the situation. So, what's the point? And over time, as you get misgendered more and more and more, you can start to think things like, is it worth it? Am I just like what they say I am? Am I just attention seeking? Am I just too much of a bother? Am I just causing too much trouble for another person? Do I matter to them? That's a big one as well. Like particularly if it's somebody that is closer in your life, or you thought cared about you, like your family, for example, or your close friends. It can start to feel like you don't matter. You don't belong, and that can really spiral with those feelings of like being a burden, and that can get really dark. That can lead to suicidal thoughts and feelings, self-harm, absolutely. And it can really pressure you to feel like you have to pass as well, that you have to do things that you actually wouldn't want to do, or go to extreme measures to change yourself, to try to be gendered the right way and try to be recognized as well. I think if anyone out there is having issues with these dark thoughts or feelings, make sure that you call Lifeline on 131114, or for an LGBT plus, definitely LGBT plus friendly organisation, head to LGBT Switchboard's Q Life on 1-800-184-527. Lifeline, I assume the majority of people there are allies, but I can't be 100% certain. I'm not sure what their training procedures are, but LGBT Switchboard is all peer-led counselling by and for LGBT plus people from 3 p.m. till midnight, 7 days a week. Make sure that you stay tuned for the rest of our conversations. We are going to be talking a little bit about transitioning, trans health, and being yourself. And we're also going to then talk about how to be a good ally. Thank you for tuning in. If you haven't seen any of our other videos, make sure you head back and check them out, and we'll chat to you soon.